me, you might have something else on your screen. All right, we're
Oh,
now
okay.
live. Okay. I'm just going to introduce you. Let me just make sure that all my windows are closed. We are now live with Lonnie Johnson. And Lonnie, you are in, whereabout are you now? Because I thought you might be in Houston at the robotics tournament, but you're not there at the moment.
I'm still in Atlanta. I go to Houston tomorrow.
Okay, so you're going to go pop in and you're actually quite involved there. What is your involvement?
Well, there is a wide range of involvement, actually. I have a number of robotics teams that I support here at my facility, about 8 teams. We touch a couple thousand kids a year who, either participating in the program or that we're introducing to the program. And that activity is expanding. For the past few years, I've been on the board of directors for Georgia First, which means that that is a board that puts on the first robotics competition across the entire state. We just completed our state championship. And now I'm actually at the board of directors level, at the national level, international level. So I'm on the first board of directors.
So you're quite involved with Lego but they're obviously, I mean, as far as I know, Lego is involved with running all of this. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, the first Lego League at the elementary and preschool level, that's where the kids really start getting introduced to the first robotics program. And we use the Mindstorm kits and robots as the teaching tool, if you will, at that level.
Okay, all right. So we are going to spend some time talking about the Lego robotics, I promise you. But I want to go back a couple of years because you are a very fascinating person. I discovered you are not an American footballer who goes by the same name. and when I did my homework, if we go back just a few decades, you were at school. What inspired you or got you excited about science in the first place? Because you obviously went on to study science and now you're very involved with it. But what got you inspired to begin with?
Well, I've always been curious about how things work. For as far back as I can remember, I've been interested in taking toys apart, looking inside, and just figuring out how to make things work. And I got to the point where I sometimes made my own toys. I was always taking on little projects, building things. By the time I got to high school, I decided I wanted to have a really big project, something I could get my teeth into, because when I started working on something, a few weeks later, I got this thing completed and, I'm checking it out and it's kind of cool. But after a while, I started thinking, geez, I want really a major project. And so by the time I got to high school, I started working on a robot. I used to watch robots on TV, and I decided I wanted to have my own robot. And not being daunted about, not knowing anything about how to build a robot at that point in time, it was very clear to me that I could figure it out as I went along. And it literally took me about a year to build Lonix, the robot. And
did you copyright that name? You could have made a lot of money.
Possibly. Lonix, yeah, you're absolutely right. In any case, Lonix won first place at the University of Alabama back in 1968. We were the only African-American school represented participating in that regional science fair, if you will. It was sponsored by the Virginia Engineering Technical Society, which was a very prestigious science club. And so obviously, being successful at that, it just emboldened my confidence that I could successfully become an engineer.
And your teachers, did they play any role in encouraging? I mean, for you, coming from a school like yours to then move into a prestigious competition like that, you must have had some teachers who were brave enough to say, this is the event we should be entering you into.
Yeah, well, obviously they were very, very supportive, because, and that's why I think the first robotics program that we're participating in and supporting now is so important, because kids, building success is its own reward, as you hear people say, but there's nothing like achievement to build self-confidence. And when these kids are able to come up with an idea and then turn that idea into reality, you can't take that away. That will be with them for life.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, when you watch the first Lego League, I mean, I've been a judge for a couple of those competitions, and I think it's gracious professionalism. You know, you're going to look for all those important qualities, but
That's right.
The fantastic feeling of watching two people getting their little device, I think it's the EV3, to actually move and pick up the thing and then get it done in the right amount of time, and
in the
that
right place.
joyful celebration. It doesn't matter who's watching. There are many intimate embraces that could be rather questionable, because these people are so excited that they've actually managed to achieve a goal that the layperson probably doesn't appreciate how much time and effort went into actually coding to get it to do that.
That's right. That's right. It's a very challenging, and a lot of thought, a lot of creativity, a lot of problem solving, a lot of trial and error sometimes. And all of that's part of it, the learning experience. And there's no, just realizing that technology is not magic. It really is knowable.
And you have to be an active participant if you wanted to do the things you wanted to do.
That's right. That's right. It doesn't come automatically by itself.
So now the thing is, you obviously went on, the science fair inspired you. You were a big fan of science, and a little birdie on my shoulder tells me mathematics is also one of your favorites too. In fact, you got a scholarship because of your mathematics. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
Did you get a scholarship because of your proficiency in math?
Scholarship to college. That's correct. One of the things that I have not talked about, that people may not know about, when I was in high school, there was also a math contest that was sponsored across the state of Alabama. And this was a series of problem-solving tests of problem-solving, if you will. And they were sophisticated problems. These were not the kind of tests where you go into a room and you sit down with and check, darking in the little, squares. This was these were problems that required a lot of thought and analysis, and they were open book problems, so to speak. So because they would get published, and you look at the series of problems and you start working on them and come up with your solutions, and you submit your solutions. And so this went on for several months, and during my junior and senior year, I actually ranked in the top 40 in the state of Alabama in mathematics.
So that's very impressive.
And as a result, he ended up spending summers at Stillman College studying mathematics. So that was one of my strengths.
Well, as a mathematics fan, I have to commend you on that, because if you think about it now, the opportunities that you've had resulted because of your proficiency at math and science.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to do the things that I wanted to do, I had needed to understand and be able to problem solve. And you can't problem solve if you don't have the knowledge.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, so then you went to college.
I will add, though, that one of my decisions, I decided to go into mechanical engineering because I felt at the time that it was more knowable, because I can see mechanisms. I could not see electrons.
I know where you're coming from. So now the question is that you move on to college. You obviously studied and you did your master's, and but then you went on to work at the Air Force. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Air Force, what was then called the Air Force Weapons Laboratory, but it's the Air Force Research Laboratory at Edwards Air Force, at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And there I was a nuclear power systems engineer and nuclear power safety officer, rather. And our job was to look at U.S. space launches that used nuclear power sources to power the spacecraft, to make sure that...
how many happened like that?
I'm sorry?
How many actually happened that used nuclear power to launch them?
Oh, at the time, it was the Voyager spacecraft. The Voyager spacecraft uses a nuclear power source.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It travels so far away from the sun that you can't use solar cells. And so it uses what's called a radioisotopic thermoelectric generator.
So would New Horizons have used something like that?
Sorry?
Would New Horizons would have used something like
Yes,
that?
New Horizons does use a nuclear power source as well.
I'm learning. I'm loving this.
And Galileo
Mm-hmm.
and the Cassini mission. So all of those missions that generally go away from the sun will use these nuclear power sources.
Okay, but
They
now
call
you were
they
not only
call
working with them in the nuclear stuff, but you also then you did a stint at NASA and JPL doing some rocket science there.
Well, after being at in the Air Force and doing the safety analysis, we did everything. We looked for things that could go wrong with the launch, because the whole idea was that we want to minimize the risk that these nuclear materials could be released to the biosphere. So and even launch approval required presidential authority. So we were doing all these analysis to support that decision process. So we would put rocket propellant on sleds and ram them into brick walls and watch how the propellant would break up and what chunk sizes to see if there were large enough chunks to burn through these protective housing for the nuclear sources. We did reentry analysis, which is one of my specialties. Looked at if something went wrong on orbit and there was a burn with the wrong orientation. Could it re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, burn up in the atmosphere, and release the plutonium on the way in? So we looked at all of these things, and I did an analysis that showed indeed there was a particular orientation where that could happen. NASA had been on record at the time saying it could not, and as a result of that, they actually offered me a job. So I got to go to the other side of the fence instead of second guessing scientists and engineers in terms of what could go wrong. I felt that if we designed the system right, we wouldn't have a problem. So I wanted to be on the other side of the fence and help design these missions. So I went to work at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory working on the Galileo mission at the time. And that was the mission to Jupiter.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you really have had quite an exciting journey up until then. And then, of course, in the background, your creative mind was still inventing things.
Yes. In fact, one of my inventions that you may have heard about, I don't know, but when I got to JPL, there was a problem with the Galileo memory keep lab. Galileo uses volatile memories, meaning that they had to have power to the memories at all times. If power was ever interrupted, the memories would be wiped out in the spacecraft. The onboard computers wouldn't have any programming, so there would be no way for it to complete its mission. So that was a big concern. So I came up with this idea for solving that problem, which turned out to be pretty novel, and apparently people at JPL are still thinking about it. So I got an invention on Galileo that went to another planet, and it was one that my peers initially said would not work. And we got it working and got it on the spacecraft, which I think was a really cool victory.
That is amazing. And you invented quite a few things. I mean, you've got patents left, right, and center. How many patents do you have up until now?
I think the last number was 139. We just got that one a couple of days ago.
What does it mean to have a patent?
Well, it means that you have an original idea that you can control the exploitation of, meaning that this technology is a invention that you can license and collect royalties on or go into manufacturing without having competition. It's a incentive program that has a very, very long history going all the way back to European days, early Europe days. Whereby in order to stimulate economic prosperity, you give a company or an individual an advantage so that they have the incentive to invest and take all the risk associated with that would be necessary to achieve success. And after a certain period of time, that knowledge or know-how or invention becomes available to the entire public, so that after this exclusive period, the technology or invention would be available to everyone to pursue. So
how long is that exclusive period?
At this point, it's about 20 years from the date at which you file the patent application.
So in other words, you've got to squeeze whatever you can in those 20 years, and then you can say to everyone, listen, take it. It's already been exploited.
Right, right.
Now, one of your patents is the very famous super soaker. And here, even in South Africa, we have heard of the super soaker. And when I was in the States, I even brought a super soaker back with me because there were a lot of imitation versions of these things out there, knockoffs that were made overseas that did not measure up to the power and the, I almost call it magnificence. When you can take a water pistol, aim it at someone's eyes from 15 feet away and actually knock the freckle off their forehead with the kind of force and accuracy, then you know it's a real super soaker. How did you come up with that idea?
Well, I was actually working on a different invention. I was trying to develop a new type of heat pump that would use water as a working fluid instead of Freon, because Freon's bad for the environment. There's no saying need is the mother of invention. So one of the things I do look for is a need that I can address, something that's really real and a real problem. So I was machining these nozzles, and I was doing these experiments to see if I could actually use water instead of Freon, because what could be more environmentally friendly than water as a working fluid as a replacement for Freon, right? So I made these nozzles, and I had it hooked up to my bathroom sink, and I shot a stream of water across the bathroom into the bathtub, and looking at the stream of water, I thought to myself, geez, this would really make a neat water gun. And I was thinking at the time that, I'm having trouble getting people to invest in some of these really hard science ideas like the heat pump or centrifugal force engine, or I had a number of other inventions that were more technically oriented, if you will. And I thought if I could do something simple like a toy water gun, I could get revenue from that, and then I could use that revenue to fund other projects. And that way I could control my destiny. And that's worked out pretty good, actually.
I mean, it's been, how many units have they sold worldwide?
Ooh, I don't know the answer to that. I will say that the sales have been in the billions of dollars.
Can you imagine that you have sold, well, the idea that you originated has sold in the billions, and yet there aren't enough websites dedicated to you. What is the problem there? Are you not marketing yourself properly? What's going on?
Well, that could very well be the case. I'm an engineer and scientist. My focus is on the technology, and I'm pretty much committed to that. We have taking on at this point some pretty challenging world problems. I'm developing a new battery technology, because if we're going to rely on renewable energy sources such as solar and wind, we need to be able to capture the energy when it's available, store that energy so that we have it when we need it. So batteries are really, really a critical element in that whole process. Also, converting energy into electricity. I have a new heat engine that I've invented that converts heat directly into electricity far more efficiently than existing thermoelectric devices. This is a thermodynamic cycle device, like an engine, where you use the gas as a working fluid, but it has no moving mechanical parts, and you get electricity directly. When I first started presenting this idea to people, I would literally get dismissed out of hand because people were claiming that it would not work. Well, now I'm very, very happy to say that we have an ongoing contract with NASA to develop this heat engine as a future power source for nuclear-powered spacecraft to convert the heat from these nuclear materials into electricity.
Okay, but now you see, you've hit the nail on the head. The reason why people don't take you seriously is you don't have enough websites talking about you. Because if you go into a meeting and say, hi, I'm Lonnie Johnson, I invented the super soaker, you could drop the mic and they would go, whatever you've invented, we'll take. But now you have to go and sell an idea, and they go, well, I'm not so sure it works. You're going to have to convince us more. You shouldn't have.
Yeah, that's interesting about that. One of the presentations that come to mind was actually with the U.S. Navy. We were in this office. I was doing my PowerPoint presentation, and one guy stood up in the room and said, we looked at this won't work. And he said, go look at the Austrian report. And then he stormed out of the room and soured the whole meeting. We've had the technology, had submitted a proposal to the National Science Foundation, and there was a fuel cell expert on the review panel who just refused to accept the idea that it would work. We submitted patent applications to China. They refused to issue a patent on it because they claim it would not work. I mean, I've got records of all of this. And now we've demonstrated the technology does work, and we've generated power with it. NASA has done a deep dive, looked at from an analytical perspective, because that's really the challenge. You have all these, I won't use the phrase that people normally use, but we have garage or backyard inventors who claim they've come up with some perpetual motion machine, or they've got this, and you hear this.
I've heard about those. Mm-hmm.
And so you can imagine that when someone comes in and say they've got a solution to a problem in energy and we can produce power, I have all the analysis to back up how and why my technology works, but it's a crowded field. When you
still have to do your song and dance, and you still have to impress them. That is crazy.
A lot of people coming up saying they've solved this, and most of them are not. They don't have real solutions. I mean, I have people coming to me with ideas that I know will not work.
But you can't be that person. You can't be the one who says, no, your idea is not going to work, because they might not have the backing that you do.
And I never tell them that.
So at least you're kind enough not to tell them that. That is awesome. So I sort of find out.
I get a lot of good ideas too. A lot of things I think that are really impressive. I wish I had time and could work on them. But I'm consumed by more ideas of my own that I have time to get to. So
I'm going to make a statement, and you can verify if I'm correct or not. You get very little sleep because the hamster wheel is turning at many revolutions per second, and you are a late night owl type person because you're always thinking of new ideas and things that keep coming to your mind. Am I correct?
I will admit, the other night, it must have been about 11:30, 12 o'clock, I got out of bed and got in my car, drove to the laboratory to start doing some work.
Does not surprise me at all.
That's after a full day. So then I go home about 4 in the morning, take a nap, and then I'm back again. So that does happen. I've been trying to manage my time a little bit better. I'm becoming more conscious of the idea that sleep is important for your health, physical health, as well as your mental health.
I'm just laughing because I average about 3 or 4 hours sleep a night, and people look at me and go, it's not healthy, or it messes with your mind. And I'm thinking, well, I'm doing okay. So, maybe.
So far, so good, right?
So now I saw that Mr. Crouch is there, and we have Hari in India. Hari, do you want to ask a question at all? You can just unmute yourself if you want to. Are you okay? You just have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Good morning, sir. And I would like to ask you one question. What is your opinion about the Indian efforts in space science? In sending I think we have made so many inroads in the space science. So being an Indian, I feel proud of Indian achievements. So what is your opinion about the Indian efforts in the field of space science?
So I don't know if you got that, but from what I can understand, you were saying, what is his opinion of the Indian influence in terms of, and what was that last bit?
In terms of space science.
Instead of space science. So what is your opinion on how things are going from India's input in the space world?
Well, I think it's great. Well, it was interesting how, and I talk about technology and the progress that we make in technology as a world, as human beings. About 2.5 billion years ago, the tools we held were rocks and sticks and things like that. And I use this example. Matsuyoshi's son of SoftBank use an example similar to this, where 2.5 million years ago, the tool we held in our hand was a rock, silicon oxide, other elements and so forth. And now we hold in our hand a cell phone. What's interesting about that is that they're both the rock and the cell phone are made of the same materials. And the difference is our creativity, the human brain. And it's very important that we really deal with the world from the perspective of understanding it, understanding the facts. We as human beings will continue to push. And I think it's really, really important that we all move forward together, because when we leave or groups out of prosperity, they become a challenge for us. They become dangerous. They become a problem because they're in a situation where they have nothing to lose. So I think it's very important that we all rise together. And I admire Indians as well as other governments' initiatives to participate in moving technology forward.
I think there's a deeper topic which obviously is quite close to your heart, and that is there's certain countries that are probably underserved, under-resourced, that if they were given the same opportunities would be able to achieve certain levels of success. I know that in Africa, for example, we have abject poverty. We have many kids that we would love for them to take part in First Lego League and science expos and all these sorts of things, but they live in very remote or rural areas where literally schools don't have the facilities to allow them to participate. And that doesn't mean they don't have the potential. It just means they haven't been given the opportunity to show their potential. And that's something that's quite close to your heart.
Yes, it is. It's interesting how, and I look at the situation sometimes, how hard advanced societies are pushing technology. We're moving into artificial intelligence, robotics in a very aggressive way. AI is getting to the point where computers are able to literally debate human beings and argue with us. Yet at the other end of the spectrum, people are desperate to get basic education. And when computers are smarter than we are, and that will happen, how do we cope with the social impact of that? And I talk about this, productivity will be very high because computers will be doing a lot of work and providing a lot of the services that we need. So the wealth that's created, we will need to be able to, we need to do some social engineering, if you will, so that wealth can be distributed in an equitable and humane way. If we choose to treat each other in a self-serving way, we become inhumane, and that's a very slippery slope and very self-destructive. And I would hate to see societies start to go in that direction.
But I mean, you obviously are a prime example of be the change that you want to see. I mean, you are going out and you've got a center. Tell us about your center, and obviously you are trying to encourage underserved communities to be involved. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm smiling when you said that because you reminded me of a phrase that my high school principal, you asked about teachers and their influence. But one of the expressions that my high school principal would always say was that, if he would encourage us to ask ourselves, if everyone in the world were just like me, what kind of world would it be? And basically, it's living the example, living the world that you want to live in, and being the kind of person you want to be. Michael Jackson said something similar, if you want the world to be a better place, start with the man in the mirror and start to make the change that's needed. And I think that's very important. You were asking a question. I'm sorry for
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, but you are the prime example. You haven't just made money, but you are investing not just time, but a lot of energy in promoting and giving those opportunities to people who wouldn't normally get them.
Well, thank you. I think that's important. you know, it's creating the kind of world you want to live in. I mean, that's just.
Well, not everyone does that. You know, there are a lot of people who make money and they are quite happy to invest billions of euros in building a magnificent cathedral in France that might have burned down. But others tend to. I mean, you could give a check, but you actually going to Houston tomorrow. You want to physically be there because that's important to you.
Well, it's inspiring. It's seeing the kids doing their thing. You know, it's very rewarding.
And what about your own kids? How old are they?
Well, I have 3 kids who are grown.
Uh-huh.
2 of them are engineers. They actually work for me. They're on my staff, inventing, and helping solve some of the world's problems. My daughter, actually, I was just talking to her this morning. She actually is interested in participating in another project that I have. And my youngest is in grade school. She's actually in the 9th grade at this point. So she's interested in engineering and participated in FIRST Robotics as well. So it's.
But it's not because you make her. It's because
that's right.
You expose them to it, and then they just gravitate towards it.
That's right. That is literally how it's happening.
But now I need to ask you something that's quite contentious. We know about the Super Soaker, but there is a rumor circulating that you also invented the Nerf gun. What is the story? Is there any truth behind this rumor?
There's partial truth. Nerf gun was already out around the time Super Soaker came out, or maybe slightly before. And so when Super Soaker became a huge success, I looked at the Nerf gun and I decided I wanted to be the king of all toy guns. And so
I love this.
So I felt that I could. Yeah, I mean, it seemed there's nothing like a good challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started designing Nerf dart guns that outperformed the Nerf guns that Hasbro had on the market at the time. I made different sizes, large and small ones, and the performance and the features that I designed into them it took Nerf to another level. And when I presented that to Hasbro, they were impressed enough. I mean, they already had the market. They had the shelf space. They had the brand name. It was well established. But when I presented that, they were impressed enough. I suspect, I don't know this, but I suspect that they felt that they should license that, because if I took it to a competitor, that could take
it would go straight away.
Mm-hmm. I could put a dent in their sales. And so rather than do that, this is me speculating, but the product, they were really good performing guns, I must admit, and I think they were smart to enter the license. And so I am responsible for taking Nerf to another level in terms of performance.
So now we hear it from you, because the internet is very shaky with a bit of fake news here and fake news there. So you were the liberator of the Nerf gun to take it to the next level.
That's right. In fact, I motivated Hasbro, and Hasbro took it upon themselves to actually look at some of the safety constraints that they were operating under at the time, and started doing some testing and so forth to see if they could actually go to higher performance. We used compressed air a lot. We had fully automatic Nerf guns and just a lot of different features there. And so N-Strike was the line that rolled out the technology. So I'm sure most people have heard of N-Strike. N-Strike was based on my technology.
Wow. So are these the kind of foam pellets that literally can penetrate the skin 4 to 5 inches? Because I know how good your Super Soakers are. In fact, would this be one of your models? I mean, would you know if it's one of your models or not? It's got pump action.
Yes, it's a pump action. It does, but that one does not have a trigger. Generally, the technology, and that's another point that you just made there. So when we did Super Soaker and took 40 guns to another level of performance, and I licensed that to Laramie at the time, which Hasbro eventually purchased. That was strictly a patent license. So the Super Soaker name or brand name is not something that I owned, even though, name was created in a conversation that I had with the president of Laramie at the time. In hindsight, I wish I had established a trademark on it. But in any case, when Super Soaker sales became successful, companies started putting other product in the line that did not use my patents, and of course they didn't pay royalties on. And so, a simple pump action, just pushing the water out as opposed to storing the energy and pulling a trigger, those kind of features. So, and water sprinklers and other things. So when we did the deal on the Nerf dart guns, I had learned my lesson from that and decided that I wanted to have my own subcategory under the Nerf line, because I knew that this category was going to outperform the other guns. And so that subcategory name was N-Strike. And sure enough, when N-Strike became hugely successful, Hasbro started putting other product in that line. And there was some confusion in terms of interpreting the wording in the contract, and we had to go through the lawsuit to get that resolved.
Now, my experience is, I know a guy that invented a game. It was a brilliant game. He called it Tic-Tac-Toe, and it was basically tic-tac-toe, but in 3 dimensions, 3 levels.
Okay.
And he had a board that was a Perspex letter S, so you could actually have the 3 levels, and you could put the pieces on, and you could get 3 in a line vertically or horizontally or diagonally through the pieces. Great idea. We presented it to a toy company, and of course, him being new to the whole game, the toy company might have exploited him a little bit. Did you find that when it comes to presenting ideas to toy companies, as opposed to presenting your ideas to, let's say, NASA, that business is a lot more different to government? It's harder to get into business, or do you think government is harder because there's far more red tape to penetrate the markets?
That's an interesting question. I think that what one has to keep in mind that the business entity is an entity that has a mission of maximizing its profit.
Correct.
That's what it exists for. And we as human beings tend to take things personal when we should not. So if a business, if it's complying with its mandate and the parameters within which it's allowed to operate, and that includes license agreements and contracts, and it can maximize its profits within those parameters, then it's doing legitimately what it has been chartered to do. We as human beings may feel like, well, certain things you're doing are unfair, but fair is not written into the contract necessarily. What's written into the contract is what you've agreed upon would be fair at one point in time, and you can't change your concept of what's fair later on because you didn't anticipate something would happen. And that's basically the lesson I learned with the Super Soaker contract. When the brand became very popular and very successful, and it could carry other product, I couldn't go back and say, well, I couldn't change the contract because that wasn't part of the agreement. So my comment is just don't take business personal. Try and anticipate the what if scenarios and things that could happen or go wrong or go right even, and plan for it and outline what you do under those scenarios in your agreement. And government, for example, a lot of the work we do, we have in the past interacted with government laboratories like Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Argonne National Laboratory, even the Jet Propulsion Laboratory as an employee. But my interactions with Argonne and Oak Ridge have been, well, I worked at Oak Ridge for a while, that was years ago, but my more recent interactions have been as an entrepreneur and with some energy related technology. And their mandate is, they have their own mandate as well. So their mandate for the research scientists there is to explore and conduct research on cutting edge technology. So if they see something that's cutting edge, and they've got a mandate to jump on it because it's in the government's and in our country's interest to be right on the cutting edge and to be out front and ahead of everybody else. So when they legitimately have a charter to jump on whatever cutting edge or advanced technology they become exposed to. So you have to be very careful even exposing the government to your idea.
I can imagine. Because I mean, they could take that idea and use it in interesting ways and make you sign a waiver.
They'll take it and they'll start doing research on, and you're going to them for help with your research, but they can start doing research independently, and you may or may not get to participate. So you just have to be careful on all fronts about intellectual property.
Wow. So now you are naturally an inventor. You haven't just invented the super soaker or enhanced the Nerf gun. You've got at least, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 inventions that are sitting around at home. I wouldn't even know where to start. What have you invented that the world hasn't seen yet?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm excited about that the world has, well, geez, I've talked about the engines and the battery technology, and even we started working on lithium air batteries. Back in 2003, 2004 timeframe.
Wow.
Yeah. This is people are talking now about solid state batteries. The lithium air battery would be the next generation beyond. So there's lithium ion, and then there's solid state batteries is the next generation, and then lithium air would be the next generation beyond that.
So then what would that mean for cell phones?
Well, the approach we're taking now probably wouldn't fit very well in a cell phone, but the lithium air would be great for vehicles, both air and ground vehicles. Imagine instead of driving maybe 300 miles in your Tesla, driving 2,000 miles in your Tesla.
Are we talking that kind of improvement?
In a single charge, yeah, that would be really cool. So we're literally working on technology like that.
And of course, in South Africa, we have a small little problem called corruption. And our government, many people, they sold tenders to people to supply coal, but actually it was to fund something else, and the coal that didn't come through was insufficient. And to cut a long story short, they've been doing what they call load shedding. They cut power for a couple of hours a day around the country, and you can't run a country like that. From a productivity point of view, you can't have factories shutting down for 2-3 hours at a time. So many people are looking towards inverters and generators, but of course you're going to need batteries to power those things.
Right.
Are these kinds of batteries the kinds of things that you could run a whole household on a small charge?
Absolutely. Well, you don't get something for nothing.
I like the way you say that.
The battery will store the energy you put into it. You've got to have a source of the energy, though. And that's why I'm also developing the heat engine, the J-Tech, that converts heat into electricity. And this could work on very low temperature, low grade heat sources as well. So it could be a very effective way of generating electricity economically so that you can store it. And you can generate electricity from waste heat, solar heat. We've even done analysis that suggests that you could charge your cell phone using body heat with this invention. So we haven't gotten there yet, but that is on the horizon.
Wow. I mean, if you keep it in your back pocket long enough, that will charge it for the day. So now, what ratio is saving the world, making money? Because if you're developing green technology and things to save the world, obviously it's something in your heart that you want to do, but you're also a business.
That's right.
So what ratio is it towards saving the world and making money?
Right now, it's been more saving the world. I've been investing very heavily in the technology. We're now ready to start transitioning some of the technologies into production or licensing it to companies so they can carry it into production. So we're actively having those discussions at this point, because we have to generate income to support that.
That is unbelievable. Sure. And in terms of you and your involvement with regards to inventions and what you're planning to do in the future, I mean, you're obviously not stopping, but other people are bringing ideas to you. Do you even have time to look at those extra ideas, or are you just focusing on the current backlog of ideas that you have?
But primarily, I'm focused on the backlog of my ideas. There have been a couple of instances where I have reached out to help other inventors. In fact, I'm working with one guy right now that I think is a very interesting situation.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, look, when you've made enough money to be comfortable, then you pass a certain point where it's about the money, but it's more about the challenge. Can I actually do something that they say it can't be done?
Well, it's really, quite honestly, it's been the challenge all along. I mean, think about the robot way back when, and it's been even the Galileo, the memory keep alive power supply for Galileo. The idea of even changing the world with a simple water gun. It's been, and the Nerf gun was a challenge. Okay, I want to be king of all toy guns, but can lightning strike in the same place twice? And so making that happen, and even inventions that I'm working on now, they're all challenging, world-changing, ambitious projects. I will say that they're high risk. Can we pull this off? Can we make it happen? Yeah.
Are you the Elon Musk of Atlanta? Because you're talking about batteries and green and changing the world. And I mean, do you ever look to people like Elon Musk and say, look, here's this guy, he comes in, he makes these big claims, and then he goes and lands 2 rockets on separate pads vertically. He means business. I mean, do you feel that there's competition out there for you?
Well, hopefully some of the battery technology will help Elon succeed in the mission he's set out. And I admire him greatly, because whereas I have taken on challenges that have required a lot of research, meaning developing new materials, a lot of empty rabbit holes we had to go down, thoroughly investigate before we realized we need to take a different approach and feeling our way in. And when I look at some of the processes that we developed, they're pretty complicated, complex, and you don't just wake up one morning and go from A to B in a sequence like this without really learning your way. Whereas the other side, alternative, which I compared more like the robot in, taking what's available and turning it into something that works, and being successful with it. Elon took existing battery technology, he made some improvements, but he decided to go with the existing batteries just to show that it's possible. Get some challenges with electric motors that he had to overcome, but it really was an engineering challenge, and more so a business challenge, I think, because getting investors, having the resources, he started out pretty good apparently, but having the resources needed and getting people to believe in him and commit to the challenge. All of those things are part of what he had to deal with, and I admire him greatly for that.
Wow.
My challenges have been more along the lines of assuming that nobody's going to believe in what I'm trying to do. How do I become successful anyway?
I mean, it's ridiculous that you at the point where you're investing, and I'm sure it's a considerable amount of money, and you still need to convince people, even though you have working models that actually prove it can be done.
Yes, well, we're gaining more and more traction in that direction. Fortunately, now people are starting to see it work, and I'm very excited about NASA. I'm excited about a couple of other confidential relationships that I can't discuss, that we're now starting to transition stuff out of the laboratory and start to really work on these things more so from an engineering and design perspective, as opposed to pure research where we've had to develop new materials that didn't exist, or other challenges that were more difficult, if I can say it that way. It's like finding the cure for cancer. You know, it's in that class of trying to find a new material or develop a new material.
Now, I know that youth are definitely one of your passions. You are doing many great things to inspire the youth, and tomorrow you're going to be at the World Robotics Championships to hopefully go and speak. And are you one of the speakers there? You're going to say a few words to the youth there?
Well, I'm always talking to the kids, but I don't think I'm on the formal agenda.
Well, that's because you don't have a website. We're going to have to talk to you about that. So what I will say is that if there were young inventors out there, and you were going to inspire them with your words. In fact, now, before we get there, what is your opinion on going to Mars and the moon? Just before we get onto the inspiration of the kids. I mean, you're involved with space and all those sorts of things. What is your thinking about Mars and the moon?
You know, people, the scientists and the government justifies going to the moon and going to Mars because of the science and the information and the understanding, the research challenge and the benefits in that space. For me, it's going because it's there. It's a challenge. It's like climbing the mountain because the mountain exists. It's more taking on the challenge and demonstrating that it can be done.
Do you think it'll happen in the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades?
Well, it could have happened a long time ago. I mean, we've been to the moon before. I think it really is more of a matter of commitment. Or do we really want to do it? And having the government make the decisions, people support the government in that decision. But yeah, it's not a matter of can we do it. That to me, going to Mars and doing other things there's an engineering challenge and a commitment challenge, a perseverance challenge. And you were about to ask about, what I tell kids, and the most important message I can give kids, I feel, is the concept of perseverance, because that's really what makes the difference. You're going to run into all kinds of obstacles and reasons to give up and difficulties and frustrations and all of those things, but perseverance is what really makes the difference.
They say persistence breaks the resistance. Well, I mean, I think it's fantastic because, we recently had Charlie Bolden in Cape Town, and Charlie was the former administrator at NASA. Right. And, and being a person of color, an incredible role model for a lot of people here in South Africa who don't have role models to look up to. So, I mean, I think it's fantastic that you are very hands-on and involved in all those competitions, and you're not just there, but you're also putting money behind it, which means that it really is something that's close to your heart. And I'm just very grateful that you've given of your time. I know that there are many students who've been watching this live stream from home and at schools, and we had a couple of people. We had Mr. Crouch's class join us. In fact, he's in Georgia, and we had Hari Krishna in India. And I know that we had Kiki in Greece who couldn't make it, but was able to watch it live on YouTube. So I just want to say thank you very much for giving up of your time. I know you're a busy guy, and I know that you've got a lot on your plate, but it's so important for young people to hear from people like you who are at the forefront of invention, and that it all had its humble beginnings at school where you were just curious. And that curiosity led you to amazing places.
Well, curiosity and perseverance. Don't forget.
And perseverance. We'll take both. It's a package deal. You've got to take curiosity and perseverance.
It's been awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to ask you to smile at the camera so we can get one screenshot. There we go. That's it. And I'm going to stop the broadcast over here.